From landslides to flooding, the impact of Typhoon Ompong lingers. Victims are still in need of help. This is On the Record. I'm Ruth Cabal.
Tutuloy na lang namin. Gagastusan ulit.
Yung kinakabahan ko, tapos on duty pa.
Tatanim ulit, sir. Ayusin niyo muna yung bahay. Hindi lang ang naasahan namin trabaho. Kung hindi kami magtatanim.
Thanks for joining us. Our guests for this episode, Philippine Red Cross Chairman Senator Richard Gordon, Oxfam Philippines Country Director Lot Felisco. Oxfam is a group of non-government organizations working to end poverty all over the world. We also have Center for Disaster Preparedness Communications Coordinator Michael Vincent Mercado. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
We know that Typhoon Ompong is the biggest typhoon to hit the country or the world this year, but the government is saying they were prepared. But still, we had casualties. Police are saying more than 80. Can you assess the government's preparations and response? Let's start with Lot.
Yes. To give credit, there was a lot of time and effort given to the early warning, the preemptive evacuations. We'd seen more of that. Days leading up to the landfall, there was a lot of communications going out. Of course, we always aim for zero casualties because one death is always one too many. Given the radius of the storm and the powerful winds and rains, it's also not surprising to have casualties. We always have to remember that preparedness comes way before the storm happens.
Mike.
I've had a chance working with municipalities, some municipalities in Benguet before, and they're actually active in community trainings, in disaster risk reduction and management. And we really have to appreciate the LGUs working on the ground because they've been very active and they've heeded to the calls and the warnings of Pag-asa. And the warning we had is really great. But I think the casualties could be attributed to some of our people in the village or in the communities who do not heed to the call of the mayor, for example, in Benguet, where the casualties was due to the fact that the miners opted to stay in the area.
Yun nga eh, kasi we now have two still ongoing rescue operations, yung dun sa Benguet and then dito sa Cebu, yung bagong landslide. But it's said we have been also due to yung continuous rains in the area. No? Yes. Yung mga ganong incidents, like, alam natin si Ompong is tama sa northern Luzon. There are coastal areas, but there are also mountainous areas, a lot of landslide-prone areas. Posible ba na kinulang tayo pagdating dun sa warning them about landslide-prone areas?
Kasi evacuation is actually a very complex decision to take. This is our experience from working during Typhoon Haiyan and in all the many disasters that we've been responding to with our local partners, not just as Oxfam alone. It's a very complex decision. If we put ourselves in the shoes of families who are also not certain where they will be evacuated to, how they will be housed, what provisions there will be, how long they will be away. It's a decision they weigh against just going, just staying there, looking after whatever little property they have, and saying na dito na lang kami kasi nandito yung ari-arian namin, yung bahay namin, hindi naman namin alam kung saan kami dadalhin. So a lot of effort still has to be put into gaining the confidence of families and communities that they will be properly looked after when they're evacuated. There's also that side of the equation kasi.
And siguro yung political will on the part of the local governments kung talagang forced evacuation, they can resort to that.
Definitely they can. But there's also then the need to follow through that these people will be looked after in evacuation centers that have the facilities and the provisions. Kasi kung meron din namang evacuation centers but they're not fully equipped, diba? So it's like between staying in your home and going somewhere where you don't feel safe din naman. So it's a decision na each family takes not lightly, I suppose.
Mike, I remember nung panahon ng Typhoon Yolanda, I interviewed your group. I was still a field reporter then. And then yung naging malaking issue doon as the people didn't know yung context nung storm surge, ano ba tong daluyong. Tingin mo, ikaw, you've worked with communities in Benguet. Yung information nila about landslide. Ngayon, sinasabi na yung doon sa Naga City where there was a landslide, may information naman yung mga tao na it was a landslide-prone area. Pero bakit ganon? They chose to stay.
Yun nga,
What is it?
siguro complexity din with the experience kasi na nakikita natin sa Pilipinas. For example, Typhoon Yolanda happened and the people who were affected mostly were in the evacuation area. So medyo conflicting siya kung sa messaging na dapat pagpunta sa evacuation area safe sila. Pero yun nga, dapat talaga political will ang mga mayor dapat nag-enforce ng forced evacuation dahil kasama naman sa General Welfare Code sa local government code ng mga LGUs.
Yung danger ng landslides, how aware are they? Kasi nabanggit mo sa akin na nag-work ka before dun sa mountainous areas. Oo.
Yes, some parts in Benguet, LGUs, they've actually created their participatory 3D mapping.
Yes.
So they're very aware of the risk in their area. So multiple hazards, they're aware of the landslide, ganyan, and typhoon. But I think siguro kasi most of the miners then who were working in the area are not from the area itself.
Oo, hindi locals.
Oo, hindi siya locals.
Pero tingin nyo ba enough yung information campaign that what the local governments are doing now?
Based on casualty rates, kulang pa rin. We have to put much more effort, invest in longer term. Kasi there might be the tendency na we kick the preparedness in dun lang sa bagyo. But actually, like I was saying, yung preparedness starts from a long process before of making communities aware ano yung hazards that they face, and then how do they confront that, and also local governments putting in place proper programs, proper policies that will make sure people are less vulnerable to disasters. Kasi what do we see? Invariably, it's poor people who are always affected. Kasi they live in very flimsy housing, they live in precarious areas, they're doing very dangerous jobs. So, yun ang dapat i-address from way before a hazard strikes.
No, I was just looking at yung nabasa kong report ng United Nations na parang more than 27 million Filipinos, poor Filipinos are really the most vulnerable when it comes to disasters. Ano?
Exactly.
What type of programs would you recommend, lalo na sa mga ganitong instances?
Well, ang mga LGU naman, they have 5% DRRM fund. And from that 5%, they could actually access 70% of it for community-based disaster risk reduction and management. So they could do trainings in the community. They could establish their early warning systems. Of course, they should enjoin the people in the community because people in the community would be the ones affected. So they should be the ones who know what to expect, what to do. The early warning system should also be clear from the national level down to the local level.
We'll talk more about yung future plans, yung long-term solutions para mas maging talagang prepared tayo and risk reduction management. Ano? Pero we have on the line si Senator Richard Gordon of the Philippine Red Cross. Senator, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, glad you could join us even on the phone, sir. Sir, puntahan lang natin yung nangyayari ngayon sa Naga City sa Cebu kasi the Philippine Red Cross was one of the first responders. Ano pong nangyari doon? Ano pong sitwasyon?
Well, this morning at 6 a.m., gumuho yung isang sa Apo Cement na residential area ng mga workers sila. At there are about 1,300 people there. And so far, we have recovered 8 dead along with other agencies. And we brought some people in the hospital. And there are still about 63 missing. In the meantime, the Red Cross has already set up a command center there. And we're providing all kinds of support. We've even brought in body bags. But, you know, these are the things that happen. We're a mountainous country. So dapat yung early warning dito sa mga areas where there are mountains. It has happened so many times in the past. Yun sa Ugol, for example, we lost over 1,000 people. Eh pag umuulan, hindi na mamarayan ng tao, may mga falls sa ilalim na exacerbation. Babaksak na lang yung bundok sa mga taong walang kamalay-malay at patay sila lahat. So this can be avoided by early warning, by NAMRIA, na alam nila kung saan ang mga falls, yung mga areas na may mining, yung mga areas na palaging binabasa, at dapat yung local government teams up with agencies like the Red Cross has a very good predict, plan, prepare, practice program that sasabihan that if you're in danger, you have to predict what is your danger? Para alam ng tao na maaga pa lang, pipito na yan, pag umuulan, alis na sila. At pumunta na sila sa safe ground. That's what I've always advocated.
Pero kanina, sir, sinasabi na sa amin ng Mines and Geosciences Bureau doon sa Cebu na alam naman nila na it was really declared as a landslide-prone area, but apparently nabigyan pa ng some sort of permit or napayagan yung quarrying in areas around it.
Well, let's fix the problem. If the problem is with local government, the MGB should go to the local government area, write letters, send a copy to local government, and tell them, you gotta get rid of these people there. They cannot be in that area. Hintay nila pagkatapos they have all the excuses na sinabi namin ganito, sinabi namin ganon, tapos namatay na yung tao. Dapat, you have to push the envelope. Pag nakita nilang wala sa lugar dapat yung mga taong yan, dapat, kung ayaw sumunod ng local government, copy permit sa kagad either the governor as well as the local government personnel in the ILG para masabihan sila, para pasunurin yung mga tao doon.
Sir, I asked this earlier to our guests who are here in the studio kasi ang sinasabi nga, di ba, the government was prepared. We saw President Duterte overseeing yung NDRMC meeting, and then he even sent his cabinet members. But apparently, we have more than 80 deaths because of Typhoon Ompong. What went wrong? What went right with the preparations and response?
You know, I was monitoring that from even 1 week before the typhoon struck. And I predicted that we would, tingnan nyo, ang mga namatay, hindi ganun karami dun sa ground. Yung mga hindi lang sumunod dun sa mga tinamaan, sinalampak ng mga tubig, sinalampak ng hangin, dun sa Cagayan. At, you know, if you were to give a grade, they did very well. Pero ang tatamaan ka ko, yung hindi natin maabot, ano yun? Yung areas ng Cordilleras. They're in the mountains, landslide ang kalaban. Ang sabi ko nga noong una sa CNN at saka sa ibang session, ang kalaban natin, wind and water and ground collapsing. And that's what happened. The ground collapsed underneath the people, ang daming namatay. They were caught unawares. At it's too late. Pagka nag-iba na, ang hirap na maghanap. At reaction time, bringing in the equipment, bringing in the people, magtatagal yan. So, the best thing to do is make sure that local folks, you have a meeting. Kaya kasi pag gumagawa ng mga bahay ngayon, meron kami meetingan para sasabihin ng mga tao kung saan dapat iilag doon sa kanilang lugar at saan tatakbo pagka nagtakbo na.
Yun nga, sir, sinasabi nyo na nga na alam na nga natin na mountainous areas yan, landslide-prone areas. So, ba't nga hindi naging ganun yung preparasyon? Tingin nyo ba it's the fault of the local officials? Walang, you know, forced evacuation, political will to move all these people out of the danger zones?
Well, ako sa akin, poverty is an absence of choice. Unang-una, ang sinasabi ko, kaya tayo marami mga taong walang mga bahay, nakaupo lahat ang gobyerno, and as national and local. Dapat nanguna tayo sa development. Dapat nagtaturo tayo kung saan natin ilalagay ang titirahan ng mga tao. Bumubulwak ang populasyon natin. Habang bumubulwak, doon na lang sa pinakamalapit sa arbuhayan ang pupuntahan nila. Kung wala, talagang titira sila. Halimbawa, dito sa Maynila, dyan sa Paseco area, pag tamaan yan ng, marami na kami sinabi dyan, pag tinamaan yan ng storm surge, marami mamatay dyan. Unang-una, parang bottleneck yan. Bago makatakas ang tao dyan, patay na yung mga tao. Ang lalapitan nila, tatakbo nila, yung mga muralya, yung nasa sa po. Ang layo nun. So, you really have to start doing urban redevelopment. You have to start planning ahead and saying, these are the settlement sites, these are the new town sites where people can move. And at the same time, kailangan talaga maghanap tayo ng pangabagong pagkakataon sa ating mga kababayan.
Okay, Senator, we need to take a short break. We hope you could join us here at the studio. I think malapit na kayo. Okay, this is On the Record on CNN Philippines. We'll be right back. You're watching On the Record. We're talking about relief and recovery after Typhoon Ompong. Still with us, Oxfam Philippines Country Director Lot Felisco and Michael Vincent Mercado of the Center for Disaster Preparedness. And also, tuloy lang natin yung ating discussion kanina. Si Senator Gordon was talking about what you also mentioned na kasi kailangan preparation ito even before the disaster hits. And Senator Gordon is already here with us in the studio. You were talking about does it boil down to providing basic services, livelihood, kaya nagmimina yung mga tao doon, and then housing, you were saying urban development, sir?
Dapat tingnan natin kung saan sila malalagay na safe sila. Na makakapasok sila sa talagang trabaho na hindi masyadong malaking gastos. Kasi siyempre, dito, tingnan ang disaster dito, natural. Nagtatrabaho sa ibang bayan yung tao, pupunta sa Manila. Hindi na nakakauwi ng maaga, hindi na nakakapasok ng maaga. So, wala ng time. So, gano'n rin dito. People want to stay in the beaches, for example, because andun ang fishing grounds. But di tayo maglagay ng mga marina for their fishing boats sa babantayan so they can leave and bicycle to work and go to their fishing boats para hindi sila mahagip. Yun ang Yolanda, ganyan na nangyari. Hanggang ngayon, nandun na naman sila sa harap. Ito mga nasa bundok, marami nagkakaingin yan dati. Tapos ngayon may mining na. Siyempre, andun sila. Pagka tinawaan niya ng basang-basa na tubig at tapos konting lindol, di mo mararamdaman niya, maraming mga lindol, they will collapse. At ayan na naman, doon sa Cebu, basa yung tubig, saturated yung ground, talagang gigiba yan. Pag nagiba, walang laban yung tao. And they should know, bago sila dumating doon, dapat nagplano na sila kung anong gagawin nila. In other words, pagka umuulan, umuulan. Uy, bakit? May ulan ka? Bakit? Umuulan, delikado. Handa kayo. Pag umulan pa na malakas, baba na tayo dito sa evacuation center.
Yung simpleng-simpleng ganyan, di ba you do that in the communities, yung mga simple na warning signal you were mentioning before? Oo.
So sa mga community partners namin, yan talaga yung main na tinuturo namin, no? Kung paano mag-uusap-usap yung mga tao sa community at mag-decide ano yung signal kung ganito na yung klase ng bagyo ang paparating sa atin. So, saan tayo pupunta? Saan yung designated evacuation area for these zones? So, yun dapat nag-usap-usap
kahit mga simpleng pito or ano bang kampana, yung mga
kalungkong, mga kawayan, mga bell ng simbahan. Actually, these are the things that they should consider within the community. Ano ba talaga yung warning signal nila?
Even may mga lubid. Kung pababa
yes,
ka,
oo.
dapat may mga lubid doon. Meron kang kahon doon ng mga piko, meron kang doon ng flashlight para pagbaba ang tao, may pumipito, susundan yan. So, apat lang yan eh. Predict, anong kalaban mo rito? Tabi ka ng ilog, baka mababa ka. Tabi ka ng mine, baka ma-landslide ka o bumaba. Plan, anong gagawin mo? Anong plano mo para makalabas kayo? Yung pamilya, may plano rin. O, lahat ng gamot ba ng bata, nandun, lahat ng si tatay, may kapasanan pa paano natin siya lalabas. Prepare it and then practice it. Pagka lumabas ka, kailangan kung may cellphone ka, kung nasa urban area ka, sabi mo sa mga kamag-anak mo, dito ako, nandito ako, bago kayo balis, para hindi na nag-aalala, hindi na makakaabala pa sa paghahanap.
But overall, long-term, ito muna yung recovery natin kasi we're also talking about losses to agriculture, the farmers,
Yes.
isa rin livelihood yan. How do you recover and then long-term, how do you avoid these losses?
Well, alam mo naman dito, ang rice natin, gagaling ang mga seedlings sa field rice, mga fertilizer galing dyan. Eh, matagal na yan, kahit na walang disaster, nahihirapan na yung mga farmer kumuha dyan eh. Dapat bilisan yan. Kaya kami, ay nakausap ko ngayon na UP Los Baños, yung konting pera na nakakalap namin. By the way, the Korean, I was late because the Korean ambassador, and na-late rin ako sa kanya, gave us $300,000 para sa disaster. So we're going to try and move that para papasalamat sa Korea. Pero dapat maibigay na mabilis siyang kaagad. Pero paano ka magpatanim? Kung giba yung bahay mo, wala kang roof, yung anak mo nababasa, paano ka magtatanim? So kami, right now, padating na yung roofs. We brought in about 7,000 roofs. We want to bring 30,000 bubong right away. Para kung meron ka ng nakatundog na 4 na poste, ilagay mo na muna yan. Saka na natin ayusin ng gusto para may titirhan. And then, ang gobyerno magbigay na kaagad ng fertilizer, roofing, at saka yung mga bigyan natin ng lahat ng equipment para maalis yung putik doon sa lupa para makapagtanim. 95% of our corn nawala dito sa Cagayan. Ang rice natin, maraming tinamaan. And that represents 2 million metric tons. Palagi ko nawala sa atin yan, 500,000 metric tons.
Ganun kadami?
Yes,
Oo.
yes.
Kasi nga harvest, season pa.
Masisipag ang mga tao dyan. We should reward the people na masisipag because kaya nila makabalik. Hindi ako natatakot sa recovery. Kaya, naka-recover eh. Eh dito, bilisan lang natin ang recovery.
Lot you wanted to say
Oo. Actually, yung concern about our farming families, hindi pa very immediate nga eh. Considering the losses, mga 700,000 metric tons nga, Senator, ang
prediction.
prediction. More than US $315 million in terms of losses, and 300,000 families, farming families who were affected by inundation and landslides, etc. So medyo immediate yan kasi they lost their harvest now, means they do not have the means to sustain their families now, and they do not have the means for the next cropping season. So bukod sa iniisip mo na yung next cropping season, you have to think about the next few days. What do they feed their families with? Tapos, ang tendency kasi pag ganito, uutang, di ba? Unless someone is able to provide services, mangungutang yan. So, cycle yan ng falling into a trap of deepening poverty. So, we're thinking long-term, but we also need to be able to meet the short-term immediate needs. Otherwise, yung pull ng negative coping mechanisms will be very, very strong.
Ang tawag ko dyan, cycle of disaster and poverty. Dapat natutunan tayo dyan eh. We will have 24 typhoons a year. Some of them, 6 will be strong. Tapos mayroon ka pang earthquake, may volcanoes, may lahat. Mayroon ka pang conflict. So dapat nakahanda tayo dyan. Ang Israel pumasok sa isang bayan at ang kalaban nila lahat, pero umunlad sila because they keep planning, they keep doing the education, the academic research and everything. Nakakaagwanta sila. Pero tayo, para bang biktima na lang tayo palagi. So you have to stop the cycle of disaster and poverty. Put the science with the people who are supposed to be handling local government. Put the science dun sa NDRMC and make sure that they mix, and then make sure you organize the people. In the Red Cross, we do 143. Bawat barangay, may 44 people dapat doon. In school, meron yan. Ginagawa pa namin yan ngayon. Saka yung mga CHED, para magkaroon nga ng culture of alertness all the time, of urgency.
Okay, Senator, we'll talk more about yung long-term plans for disaster risk reduction. We're taking another break. This is On the Record. Stay tuned. We're on the last stretch of the program, our topic relief and recovery after this disaster, this time after Typhoon Ompong. Senator, you were saying we have to break the cycle of disaster and poverty. Long-term plans, let's start with the NGOs who are helping our government very much with this. Mike.
With CSOs such as the Center for Disaster Preparedness, we actually help communities after disaster, sustainable livelihood talaga. Agriculture, dun sa case ng Benguet, it will be hard for them kasi mining is main source of livelihood since they don't have anything na alternative source of livelihood. So that will be a challenge for the government, I think, to provide them with a source of livelihood.
For Oxfam naman.
I just want to go back to what we were saying earlier, that really the best preparedness is sound development. Making sure people are healthy and safe and they live in sturdy shelters and housing. Making sure they have the livelihoods to be able to withstand any disaster. So if we put that as our standard of preparedness, hindi lang tayo magkakasya dun sa preparedness right before yung alert, yung early warning. It's really making sure na people have the means to be able to survive a disaster and recover. So livelihoods, again, very, very important. And especially in our case, agriculture has to be thought of as something long-term that government should invest in to make sure farming families are able to benefit from agriculture.
Pero naisip ko lang din, di ba, parang sinasabi nila, yung resiliency daw ng Filipinos is one of our best traits when we say, kaya lang yung iba pagbaha, ay sanay na kami dyan, yung iba pagbaha, nagtatampisaw na lang sa tubig. Is that really good or bad? Sa kultura ba natin yung resiliency na yun?
Well, the Filipino is naturally resilient.
Yeah.
The other thing is he's very adaptive. Kung padala mo yung Pilipino abroad, mabubuhay yan. Hindi nagugutom ang Pilipino kung basta may pagkakataon. And that is what the country must bring to the countryside. Opportunities. Pag may opportunities, meron siyang sound livelihood. Pagka may opportunities, gumaganda ang infrastructure, intrusion. At nagkakaroon ng planning. And makita mo, halimbawa dito lang, isipin mo, kung tayo ma-earthquake ngayon, ang traffic sa Maynila ngayon, paano darating yung mga responders? I just want to scare you.
Yes.
mahihirapan ang tao kung hindi yan. So, there's no planning. Meron ba niyang humanitarian corridor? Ginagawa namin, meron kami mga signboards yan pagkalalakad yung mga tao.
saan dadaan.
So, it's important na yung planning. Kaya nga sinabi ko nga, again, I will repeat, 4 Ps. Predict. Save yourself. Ikaw ba, pag pumasok ka sa loob ng hotel o sa isang bahay, alam mo ba kung saan ang fire exit?
Yeah.
Pag namatay ang ilaw, anong gagawin mo? Di ba? Dapat kapain mo yung pinto to the fire exit. Yung plano mo, anong exit plan mo? It's just riding an airplane. Tingnan nyo to the back kung saan ang fire exit, saan ang exit. Tingnan nyo yung ilaw sa baba ng... it's important na ang tao, and where do you get that? School. Kaya gagawa na naman ng Department of Disaster. You don't need that. Just bring the science to the schools. Inculcate that in the culture of the Filipino. We're resilient, but hindi tayo bobo. We are resilient, but we can really make do and make innovation so that we can save ourselves and continue to improve. You can have change, radical change, but you have commitment and continuity. Yun ang kailangan natin.
Okay. Thank you very much to our guests for tonight. Si Senator Richard Gordon, of course, and Oxfam Philippines Country Director Lot Felisco, and from the Center for Disaster Preparedness, si Michael Mercado. And that's On the Record this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Ruth Cabal.
Gagastusan ulit.
Yung kinakabahan ko, tapos on duty pa.
Tatanim ulit, sir. Ayusin niyo muna yung bahay. Hindi lang ang naasahan namin trabaho. Kung hindi kami magtatanim,